record. Sorry, let me come back to
Okay.
share. First time this semester I forgot to do that. Okay, I'm back. Okay, so what I was saying with this is, think about, if I said this already, I'm sorry. I'm not sure, I cut out. The reason I just want to focus on this for a minute is I found in a number of people's work, while you definitely hit the mark on how we should measure it, um, there was a lot of stuff in there, and you can probably simplify what you've done and make it less complex for yourself, right? So if you think about it in, okay, my step is I'm going to measure or understand the in-market performance, right? What questions am I going to answer? Okay, and these are just examples, right? Okay, well, I want to know, did I impact awareness? Was I able to break through the clutter? What media channels are most effective and efficient, etc. There might be others, depending upon what you decide the questions are that you want to answer, right? Again, no right or wrong. This is about making sure you understand what each of these different kind of steps or stages can do for you along the journey of creating to launch of advertising and measuring. And then we have approach. It could be a lift, an MTA, MMM. Maybe you're going to do two things. Maybe you're going to do three. Maybe you're going to do a lift, then you're going to do an MTA, then you're going to do an MMM. And as we talked about last week, I think Justine was talking about this, is the discussion of, like, I know Bank of America does an MTA and an MMM, right? A lot of companies do that. And then reconciling the pieces. And they do different things, right? But it's very confusing. And then the output, right? What do you think you're going to get out of this? Well, I might understand the impact of my advertising. I might get a view on how to optimize my media channels. So there are many ways to write this, but this would be the format that we've been looking at through. Is that helpful for anybody who felt like they couldn't actually fit it into these, especially the campaign measurement, couldn't get it fit into these different kind of categories?
Yes, it helps. One of the questions I have for you is I've been trying to, as I've been working on the final project, I've been trying to, so I've been kind of going back to some of my homework assignments, but there's way too much there and way too much detail. And I need to sort of put it into like the Cliff Notes version for the research plan. And so I guess that's my question for you about like the level of detail for the research plan. I don't know how to ask the question. I guess I'm trying to say, like, it feels like
I know what you're talking. I think I'm in the same thing. How far into the weeds do we know? If we're recommending focus groups for one of the steps, do you want to know with this kind of audience and these kind of questions, or blah blah blah, or are we going to use focus groups to get at an understanding of customers think about XYZ?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. If it's something you've already described in detail in one of your other steps, I think that if you just say, we're going to do focus groups, this is who I'm going to talk to, this is what the discussion is going to be like, that's great. You don't need to write a discussion guide for this. Okay. I just want to know that you know how to use it, and making sure that you're using qualitative the way it's designed to be used and not instead of quantitative, and what you expect to get out of it. Right? Because you've already written a discussion guide.
Right. I have another question.
Does that help? Hang on a second.
Yep.
Lori, does that help?
Absolutely.
So, think about who you want to talk to and what you want to get out of it, because this is really, when I think about this assignment, it is, a compilation of everything you've done for many of the weeks. And it's really, I need to be able to see when I look at your assignments that you know how to use these tools, you know where everything belongs, you know what the flow should be, what you need, what questions will get answered by each of the steps, and what will come out of that. Right?
Mhm.
That's why questions we answer, what is the approach I'm going to use, and what's the output going to look like? And as you do it, each step will flow into the next, except for at one point in time, you are going to have a break where, there'll be handoffs to a marketing department or creative services who will redesign the advertising and give it back for testing, whatever it happens to be. Okay, Lynn, sorry.
No, that's okay. The assignment mentions inputs, and some of them we included those on the other assignments. On this, it asks for inputs and outputs. Do you want detail on that? Well, we need to know all these different variables, or by having
Just, you can summarize it in the approach.
Okay.
So for example, I'm making this up, okay? I'm going to do a lift study. In order to do that, I need to know all the details of a media plan. I need to know who the target audience is. I need to know what the exact creative is that we ran, things like that. But exact creative by media type. And I think you can just put that in the approach. It does not have to be as detailed as this past assignment. Fair enough? But
Yep.
you should use on each one of your assignments. Hopefully I gave you enough feedback or detailed enough feedback so that you would know if there was something that you could do to refine something, right? And then you can just use that right in this final research plan. And again, you can use Word, you can use PowerPoint, you can do whatever is the most comfortable format for you. Other questions?
Can
No?
you just, when is the actual project? Like, when did you have to have them by?
Oh, so yes, I had that on my list of things to talk about. So, I don't set the timeline on when grades have to get turned in for NYU. So they are due on Monday morning, all grades. So I need to have everybody needs to have their final project into me by midnight on Thursday, August 1st. I know this is a tight week because we had an assignment due and then we've got this on top of it. But I really, unfortunately, because of the timing, again, for NYU, there's no way to provide any extensions at all. So I apologize for that, but it is just what it is. Sorry about that. So the other thing is in terms of the grading, in terms of the way that I'll grade the final project, it's going to be similar to what I've done for the other, all of your other assignments. I just want to understand. I want to make sure that it is clear to me that you understand what you've learned in the past 7 weeks, what the tools are, how you use them, where to use them, why you'd use them. If you choose not to use them, that's totally okay. Just tell me why you've decided that you would do an MTA, a no lift study, or, you wouldn't do quantitative, you would only do qualitative, or you would only look at 0 party and first party data. You'd never use second or third party data. I just want to know why. And don't feel like you have to write a long story. You can just say, please note, this is what I did. It's fine. You can keep it pretty tight on the language. Whatever works for you. Again, if you can try to use this format, that would be great. Any other comments, thoughts, questions, concerns? Don't be stressed about it. You guys have done it. No, really, I know it feels stressful because I know it's worth a lot of your grade. But honestly, if I thought any of you had any issues or did not understand anything, I would have called you. Okay, so I think that you're all in very good shape to do this. I think you clearly understand the different stages. You've done great work on each of your homework pieces. throughout this past 7 weeks. So just fall back on that. And again, for those of you who have contacted me with questions, keep it coming. And for anybody who hasn't, don't be shy. It is totally okay. I am around tomorrow and Thursday. And will make myself available to answer any questions that you have. Email, phone, you can text me, whatever you want. I don't want you to stress over this. I just want to make sure, that you've learned a lot in the past 7 weeks. Good? We're all good? Any questions? Any last questions? Anything is okay. Just lay it on me.
So we can actually use literally excerpts from our prior assignments and just drop them in
Absolutely.
here. Perfect.
Absolutely. That's the whole idea. The whole idea is that you can basically go grab, oh, you know what? I used this first party data thing over here. I'm just going to plop that thing in. All you have to do is just kind of reformat it a little bit, probably to fit in here.
And
However
shorten,
you did it,
probably, yeah.
maybe shorten it a little bit, but I'll understand it. If you give me the pieces, and if the goal is for me to make sure that I understand that know that you understand, I think we're good. Okay? Does that help?
Yep.
And if any of you are worried that you have too much or not enough, then you can just shoot me over a copy and I'll tell you if it's not enough or if it's too much or something like that. Does that make sense? And as you know, even if there's a lot of stuff, I will make my way through it and make sure that, that you've got the pieces in there that, we're looking for. Okay. Are we good? And just on the thing, Lynn, that you mentioned, while we didn't necessarily do qualitative or make a choice on qualitative or quantitative for this particular for this social game, right? The social media game, but we did it for monk fruit. That's okay because it's still the same principles, right? You just need to figure out if you are going to use that and where that would fit in. Right? Okay. Any other questions? Thoughts? We're still going to be here. I'm just going to turn it over to Mark for a little bit. So if any questions pop up, we'll spare a few minutes at the end as well, if that's good. Okay, everyone, we good? Okay. Okay, so I invited Mark to come spend some time with us. And the reason is, first, it's nice to get to know the man behind the video, right? Because he is the creator of this class and the program. So thank you to Mark. And also, I figured everybody is either going to be taking another class or you'll be thinking about what class to take next. So why not have Mark here with us so that you can ask him questions and he can tell you a little bit about some of the other classes and, we can just have a discussion with him. So I'm going to turn it over to Mark. Does anybody have any questions for Mark before he even starts? Going to head him off at the pass or no?
No questions.
No, Scott? You have
No
one?
questions. No.
No question. Okay.
Questions.
Mark, I'm going to turn it over to you for a few minutes. This is going to be cash, everybody. So I would
Cool.
say, not to speak for Mark, but jump in.
Well, good meeting you all. I had heard about this cohort coming in and was excited to meet some of you folks. I apologize if you're tired of seeing me. My intent wasn't to actually do that many videos in the course, but it ended up that way. I don't know if in those videos I introduced myself, so I'll just give you 2 minutes on who I am. I am the chief research officer at a ad agency called VML, which has its tentacles all over WPP. Used to be VML, used to be VML Y&R, used to be J. Walter Thompson, used to be Wonderman, Wonderman Thompson, all these different brands that got mushed together. But now we're this gigantic ad agency, and I look after research for them. I'm a longtime adjunct at NYU and Columbia. Been teaching there at Columbia for maybe 15, 16 years now. And I play in a band of market researchers. So we are called the outliers, of course, because it was either that or the standard deviations. But and if you're intrigued or horrified by what a band of researchers may sound like, you can actually find us on Spotify. We get a nice fat check for about 76 cents a year for all of our plays that happen there. But it's The Outliers. It's called Late Out of the Gate is the album if you want to hear it. Our claim to fame is when we launched the album, and I can't tell you how or why this happened, but we had a #1 song in Belgium for 2 weeks. I started getting these random phone calls from DJs who wanted to interview us, and I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, I thought it was a joke or something, right? But anyway, so that's me. So this program, a couple of interesting things about it, perhaps. I heard Debbie mention monk fruit. That's actually based on a real case study. That was a client I had. It wasn't monk fruit that they had in their beverage. It was actually maple syrup that they had in their beverage, and it was called Maple Mama. It was a great product. I don't know if it's still around, but that's what that's based on. When you think about if you are going to take all the courses in the certificate or complete the certificate, you sort of have to think about these 6 other courses and which ones are kind of appropriate for you or not. And I guess there's kind of 2 schools of thought that people think about when they think about what courses to take. And one is to focus on your areas, kind of the stuff you do every day, which is a good strategy. But an alternative strategy that I'd like you to consider is to think about the things you don't do at all. Part of what I learned in helping people kind of put this course together and think about personal development is, I think in the research and analytics space, it's really easy to get stuck in your silo and kind of see your world and what you do all day. And to me, this is one of the big benefits actually of being an ARF member, is you get to see a lot of things that you never touch. And these might be things that come before you or after you in the process, or just you just don't even kind of play with those things. And I find that just super helpful, because I find when you get stuck in your silo, your thinking gets a little siloed too. And when you have the opportunity to see the world through a different data person's eyes or a different researcher's eyes, I think it just kind of opens up your mind to things that you hadn't thought about before, career-wise, but also just your thinking in your own silo. I find it benefits me to think about things that I don't do a lot. So, one way to look at this is, wow, gee, I've never done campaign measurement before, but gee, wouldn't it be helpful to know a bit about that, right? So I work a lot on the upfront stuff, building the campaigns and creating data that helps us understand what to do in the campaign. But I don't get a ton involved in the back end of measuring the success of that. So, I helped the team that built that, and I found that really useful, right? Or if you never get involved in the development of creative, kind of seeing that side of it. So just, another way to think about how you might approach selecting which courses you want to take for the rest of the certificate. There is a course that is just kicking off development now, an additional course. I'm almost loath to bring it up because I don't think it'll be done by the time you're done selecting all your courses. Maybe it will. But as you may guess, the course is on AI and how AI intersects with all the things we all do and all the things you've heard about in this program. So it might be ready. If it is ready, you'll all hear about it, I'm sure. And you know, the upside of it is it's obviously what we're all talking about, thinking about, scared about, excited about. But it changes so quickly that whatever the course is about, 2 months later, you got to change the whole program around because it's all different. But anyway, I think just kind of thinking about it in those two terms, do you want to go and kind of go deep in your own area, or do you want to challenge yourself and hear stuff that you may never use, but I think will make you think a little differently about your job and your career? And just one other thing, I don't know how many of you, if any, watched the ridiculously long lecture on behavioral economics. Anybody? No, I didn't. Did you? It's long. I know it's like 2 hours or some nonsense like that, or 3 hours. It was one of the Explore pieces, I think in class 5 or something. It studying for that, working. I mean, I built that lecture out at the request of a client. A client had asked me to do that for them. Pfizer was the client, and we built it. And honestly, in the process of building it, it kind of changed my brain a lot, because one, a lot of behavioral economic principles, all of us know already. We use them all the time in research. Researchers have known this for 50 years. We just didn't have a name for it. But there's a lot of other stuff that's really, really kind of mind-blowing a bit, and makes me, it changes how I approach what I do all day in terms of how I even frame problems, how I write questions, how I think about structure of surveys and guides and things like that. So if you haven't, and you find yourself with a spare couple of hours, take advantage of it and take a read through it and watch the video. I think you'll find it helpful. And if not, you can send me nasty notes on LinkedIn or something. So that's kind of all I wanted to talk about. Did you guys have any questions about the program, the courses, the content? Happy to have an open discussion about them. Lori.
Yeah. So I have a question, and I was trying to find the names of the 6 courses. I know they're in the video. I just was watching it. So there's one around like uncovering insights. What's the name of the course? Do you know what it's called? Oh,
Yeah.
look at.
Can you see him? It was there and it went away.
Discovery and testing of consumer insights.
Yeah.
That one. So I'm just curious about that one, just because I feel like so often we're told, and you say this in the thing too, it's not an observation, it's not a fact, it's really about developing insights. But I feel like that's the one course that, even though, through other channels that, training that I've taken and everything, I feel like that is the hardest thing to teach people for some reason,
to discover it.
Yes. And so
yeah, testing it is easy,
sure. Okay, sure. Yeah.
Discovering it is harder.
So I guess my question is, like, can you just tell me a little bit about that class as far as like what to expect? Because I feel like that's the place where we honestly, I feel like everyone I work with could use a class and discovering insights.
Yeah. I mean, I think that course is more about the process of it than it is training on how to do it. And I think the creative development course actually goes into it in a little more depth because to me, understanding insights is about understanding people, and understanding people is about understanding psychology and what motivates people, right? Because insights, as I said in probably the first lecture in this course, is much more about why do people do things. And I think that's actually, Lori, the way I often get to an insight is just to ask that question, right? Why is this happening? Right? So I gotta look around because I probably shouldn't say what I'm about to say. But so we are in the middle of a pitch for Starbucks, right? And the big question that they're wrestling with is Gen Z is really not engaging with the brand at all, right? And and how do they keep the brand relevant for that younger age group, right? So literally this morning they're briefing me on this and we're talking about it. And I started asking why. Why is that? Why wouldn't they be going there, right? And what I started thinking about is, well, when Starbucks launched, they launched under this idea of the third place. We're not your work, we're not your home, we're this third place you can go. That was sort of their strategy, right? So they didn't want a retail coffee shop where people would go in, buy the coffee and leave. They wanted you to go and hang out, and you didn't even have to buy anything. You just go there and plug in your laptop and hang out. It was your third place. And I started thinking, well, why wouldn't Gen Z go there? Why wouldn't they go to this third place? And, what I came up with, again, and I'm just trying to answer why. Why would that be? So what is it about Gen Z, which is 12 to 27 years old, right? That's who that cohort is. What's unique about them? Well, they're the mobile digital natives, right? And that's when I sort of, my insight into that was, well, the reason is they have a third space already. It's called their phone, and that's where they spend all of their time. They don't need that third space anymore, right? Because they have one that we never had when Starbucks launched. And then the other thing that kind of struck me is, and this is just through the wisdom of age, you see this with brands all the time. What was really cool to me in 1995, my daughter looks at and says, yeah, that's your thing, Dad. I don't want that thing. I want my own thing. That's like, maybe that's dad cool, but it ain't me cool, right? So it's sort of lost its luster, and my daughter has said this to me. She goes, yeah, we don't go to Starbucks because every time we go in there, we run into someone's mother. And that's not what they want, right? They want their own thing when you're that age, right? So those are just like two insights that are bubbling around my head, but they only came because I said, well, why would this be happening? Why is it? Well, what's the sea change that made people think differently about this brand? So, and I think the magic in it is just exercising that why muscle and just always, I'm sure my wife, I irritate the shit out of her because I'm always like a 2-year-old. Why? Well, why? Why would that be? Why do people do this? Why don't people do that? Right? We're working on right now a big study for Narcan, which I don't know if you guys are familiar with, but it's a branded version of naloxone, which is a medication that immediately reverses the effects of opioid overdoses, right? And again, I'm sure I'm talking out of turn here. I shouldn't be telling you all this, but their their sales are way below what they want it to be, right? And I'm trying to think to myself, like, well, why would that be? You've got this miracle drug that literally is saving people's lives. The good news about the drug is if you give it to someone who's not having an overdose, it's completely benign. It does absolutely nothing, right? So you almost can't go wrong giving it to someone if you suspect an overdose. So why? What's the problem? Why won't people buy this thing? And there are some structural marketplace issues, but the real why, I think, is because of the stigma associated with opioids. And when people go to the store to buy it, they're concerned that other people will look at them as if they're a drug abuser or a junkie, or they live with a junkie or something, or they associate with junkies, right? So there's this real stigma that they somehow have to get around. But I think that's kind of just the magic. And I know it sounds simple, but kind of the more you exercise the why muscle and just keep asking that question over and over, why? And then consuming a lot of information about it, those whys start to present themselves with things, right? So I think the discovering and testing the insight does cover a lot of that material, and the creative development class covers it. But quite honestly, a lot of where I think the ability to spot insights comes from is practice, doing it everywhere you can. You know, when I watch TV or video ads online, I do that all the time. It's almost like a reflex now. I try and understand what was their insight and what did it explain and how did they get there? Right? There was a really good campaign about called Not a Gun a few years ago, and it was about people of color who get shot by the police because they're carrying a candy bar, and the police, mistake that for a gun. And the question is why? Why would that be? And why is it only people of color? Why doesn't that happen to all of us, right? And the answers to that are rooted in cognitive biases that we all have, right? But you just don't get there unless you push on the why a ton. I don't know if that helps at all, Lori, but that's
Yeah.
kind of how I
Mark,
approach it.
I guess the question for you about the why and the insight is, I think we are always striving to come up with the insight, but I think a lot of the partners that we work with and support always want the data. And I don't know if it's because they don't trust our insight or they want to come up with their own insight and only want the data.
Well,
When you
that's
say they
so-
want the data, what does that mean?
Can I just add on to that? Because that's what I'm thinking too, Scott, is that people, if I were to say, oh, the why behind it is, and I keep saying why, well, they would say, well, do you have data to support that reason that you're saying, is the why?
Well, that's the testing part, the
Sure.
discovery and testing of consumer insights, right? So it is hard. And I think I probably talked about that in that first lecture, that true insights often require a bit of a leap of interpretation, and it requires a bit of courage because, and I say this to my students at Columbia when I hand them data and we talk about finding insights, and they always go, well, where are the insights in here? I say, they're not in there. There are findings and stats and observations in there, but the insight, you got to think about and kind of build the logic train that gets you there. So with internal stakeholders, that's what you have to do, is sort of build the logic train with the data you do have. But then if you really have confidence that that is the insight, then you got to go test it out and see whether it actually does work. But the danger of not doing that is you end up in this literal space, and with this Starbucks example I'm telling you about, I'm hearing all these people talking in the office today about, well, it's inconsistent experience with orders at the counter and people getting orders wrong. And I'm like, I don't believe that. That sounds like bullshit to me. I'm just not buying that,
Well,
you
the
know?
funny thing about that is all the Gen Z people order on their phone and pick it up.
Yeah,
I
right.
don't know how that
But
could be.
it feels like, people who don't really understand what insights are, they tend to look at the easy things and they tend to try and draw conclusions based on the easily observable things. But those easily observable, easily measurable things often don't move the needle because they're not true insights. And what you do is you end up sounding like everybody else, right? And if you start looking at ads for other retail bank brands and you took the branding off and you couldn't tell who it was, well, that's because there's no insight in there. It's just kind of saying the same thing that everybody else is saying. So again, I don't know if that helps, but it does take a bit of courage to bring forth an insight where you don't have a single data point that supports it. But then you have to have the courage to push them to go test it. Does that help,
But-
Scott, or no?
Yeah, I mean, it's helpful. It's just, I'm not sure in all organizations how practical it can be, just because, we are we don't have the luxury of saying we're going to go test it, right? We have to have some commitment from business partners to want to test it, right? And that's where it gets a little bit of friction, right, in getting there.
Do they understand the difference between an insight and an observation and the power of an insight? Like when I look at organizations like Procter and Gamble, who are not a bank, I get it. But they understand insights, like really what an insight is,
Yeah.
and they work hard. I mean, Debbie, you can tell us about your experience at Unilever, but certainly
Is that a cultural thing though?
it might be. It might be.
Yeah, and Scott,
think
I was
it-
thinking about this. I mean, really,
Okay.
it does feel like cultural because, the banking is integrated in data and analytics. So that's the world that there's swimming in, is just looking at the data and the observation. Whereas somebody with the packaging or trying to push goods constantly and iterate is more in that other space of looking for the next best thing.
I agree, Steve. I was gonna say something like that because when I was at Unilever, in the CPG world, it's a little bit softer. You have data, but it's not the abundance of data you would have. In the banking world, financial services, even in D2C, and it's a different world, and you kind of you go with some of the softer stuff, right? And the other thing is too is I think over time, um, and maybe it's just the I don't want to. I think it's just the way the organizations function as well, like the Proctors of the world, the J&Js of the world, the Unilevers of the world. It's just this whole insight thing. People accept that it's a little touchy-feely.
But I
Right.
don't think you can't change it. And I'll give you an example. So we've been working with AstraZeneca Oncology, which if I'm going to find a category that maybe has the same right-left brain profile as banking because of the regulations that you have to work within, it's probably pharma. And there's this group of people that we've been working with who are highly enlightened about insights and understanding motivations, specifically precognitive motivations. So I don't think it's impossible. It may be the culture of a specific organization in a specific city, in a specific office. I don't know. But, maybe your challenge is steeper then which is to try and educate them on the value and power of insights.
Yeah. I think there's some occasions where I think we would say we came up with the insight, but by the time we've tested it,
Mm.
you know,
They
it doesn't
tested
feel
all
like
the
an
power
insight.
out of it. Yeah.
Well, it feels like maybe they came up with the insight themselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments?
I'm looking at the circle of the new classes, and it looks like there's arrow. Is there any particular order beyond, this as the starting point?
No.
It looks like you're suggesting
No.
something here.
No.
Okay. Because there's
Quite
one that's not
honestly, that was
attached.
yeah. I think I created the graphic and someone said to me, it looks like a researcher created the graphic. And I said, it was. and I said, that's about as good as I can get. And they went in and did that. I don't think that's intended to mean anything.
But we did just get an email yesterday saying that the one that's in purple and campaign effectiveness measure.
Oh,
Are the
yeah,
next
that's only in
two.
purple because that's the deck I happened to bring up
Okay.
today just to because I couldn't remember the names of the courses either. So
Yeah, but the
Lori,
next two,
which are
the
the next two?
the one in purple, the informing creative development, and then the campaign effectiveness. Do you want me to just send you the email?
I probably
you
have
get-
it buried in thousands of other ones, so.
Okay, well, yeah, it came
You
last
can
night.
send it to me if it'd be easier, actually.
I don't think there were any prerequisite sequencing to these courses. So I don't think you need to worry about that.
But this is Lena. I was just wondering because you were talking about, is it informing creative development that will help us with developing insights?
Yeah,
'Cause
because a lot of the content in that course is about human motivation and what sits behind human decision making, how we make decisions, how memory structures work in the brain, why memory is important, the role of emotions in decision making. So there's a lot of that kind of content in there. And sort of understanding those kind of things help us understand real insights, because insights come from all that stuff, right? It's kind of insights are often the things that we don't think, but actually have an impact on why we do what we do.
Okay, I appreciate that. Yeah, I think I put mine as campaign effectiveness measurement as number one choice. And number two was the informing creative development. Maybe I can still change, but yeah, because I work within.
Well, that's the one I was
B2B.
talking about, Lena. The
Yeah.
informing creative development. That's the one that has a lot of the psychology content.
Yeah, I put that as number two because we had a number one, number two, like a
That's
first
okay.
choice, second choice. Yeah.
I don't think you have to worry about the order in which you take those two.
Yeah. But I also struggle with some of the stuff about insights because I work in B2B. So
I don't think, I think there's a misnomer that categories like banking, B2B, healthcare professional marketing that I do a lot of, that there's no insights in there. And I completely reject that as a hypothesis. I've seen plenty of examples where you can find insights about doctors, about IT decision makers. I mean, we have found them in plenty of places. And there's also a belief, I think, an erroneous belief that in B2B, business people are impervious to emotional appeals. That's not true either. And I have data that proves it. It's just that the industry tends to shy away from it because we believe it's this hard left brain process of weighing pros and cons of things. But if you look at B2B as people, right? So if you're trying to sell a new software system, an ERP software system into someone at a corporation, an IT person, why do they want to pick the right system? Right? Why? What's in it for them? Why do they want to pick that? And when you boil it all down, the reason they want to pick the right system is because it instills a sense of pride in them that they did the right thing for their organization. That's an emotional thing. That's an emotional appeal. It's less about MIPS and megahertz and bits and bytes and downtime and maintenance and all those things. And it's more about that I do the right thing for the organization. The same thing that motivates you to do a good job in your career, right? It's the same thing for them. It's just about kind of getting around this fallacy that it all has to be rational spreadsheets and checklists of pros and cons. I've actually found in some of the data we've done that even though financial services is often seen as a highly rational category, nothing could be farther from the truth. Money is one of the most emotional ideas that we all have to deal with, other than maybe healthcare. Money is a very emotional topic. And if you can sort of really unpack what the emotional motivators are for people, it's a powerful, powerful thing.
I appreciate that.
I
Thank you.
agree. I was gonna say, I agree. I think it's emotional and it's irrational.
Yeah, very much so. Right. I mean, I've done a lot of work in the investment space, and it's very emotional and irrational. Why do some people save for their retirement starting at the age of 30, and why do some wait till they have that classic oh shit moment, right? It's a very irrational category. I think that's right, Scott. So how can you leverage it? Go figure those things out.
Any other questions for Mark? Thoughts? Anything pop in your head about the final project while we've been chatting with Mark?
It'll pop in my head at 3 o'clock in the morning.
There you go. Lori.
That's what LinkedIn's for.
Draw me an email, Lori. Anything else, guys? We're at time. Happy to stay longer, but I don't want to also keep you, over time.
No, this is great. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
So, well, thank you all. This has been a great 7 weeks. Let me know if you have any questions. I look forward to seeing all of your final projects. Thank you to Mark for the program and for spending some time with us tonight. We really appreciate it. Anything else, guys? Any other questions, thoughts?
Thank you.
No, thank you.
Great.
Thank you. Okay. Guess we'll talk over email. I look forward to seeing everybody's assignments, etc. And again, if you have any questions, let me know. Okay. Thanks, guys.
Good meeting
Thank
you
you.
all.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.